go. Okay, we're talking bison here, or buffalo, depending on which, but I've heard on good authority this is an American bison. So we're going to be painting a little bison here. And by little, I mean absolutely enormous. I just recently learned that this is the largest North American mammal on land, which is pretty crazy. I mean, whales get quite a bit bigger than these, but 2,000 pounds. This is not a small ungulate. Ungulate means a hooved animal, by the way. I learned that when I was young, and it made me feel the smartest. So, we're going to be sketching this up. I traced it out a little bit on this little thing. We have a really fun little coloring page book. If you want, you can download one of those, put it on something light, trace it, or just do it by hand. But we're going to paint in our nice little bison right here, and it should be a pretty quick one. They're kind of not overly colored here. We're going to use mostly burnt sienna, but I'm going to use some purple here too, because I think that would be a fun combination. Let's see how it goes. So step one, just dip your brush in a bunch of times. Just get a lot of that indecision over your bristles. And once you have decided how to paint this, then you'll just go do one little brush stroke. And I'm actually going to put a bunch of brown right up on our little bison's hump. Just like this. Right up over the edge. And they have kind of different furs on them. I would love to get close enough to this animal one day to like really understand its anatomy from a safe distance. They are, as we said, North America's largest mammal on land. But they have kind of this ruff around their neck that's going to be a lot darker. And then they have this kind of fur on the back. So we're adding a little bit of this here, just some burnt sienna. And we're going to work relatively quick on this layer because we do want it all to kind of blend in and fade just a little bit in some of these cool ways. We can get a bit of brown maybe on its little ear here. And if we're feeling it, we might even get just a touch of brown or maybe an indigo or mix the two together. And we want just a touch of something on the horn because we're going to end up filling in that horn later, but we don't want it to be just pure, white because they're not, unless they're, a bison skull. And this is not a dead bison. This is a live, vivacious bison. That is what we're sketching today. Or at least it's on the recipe. One live, vivacious bison. So we've got this. And while it's still wet, I'm now going to jump in and do some purple right here. A little bit of purple working its way up. There we go. And it's going to kind of fade down. This is always just how I've seen bison, and I'm not sure if it's because bison are like a sweatshirt, and when they get wet, they kind of do that like color shift or what, but they kind of have this lovely sort of shift down to something slightly darker, I find. So we're going to just do a little bit like that, a little bit up top. And you can see I've already kind of out scooted this one too. If you go outside the lines, I'll show you kind of like this. See? Not a big deal. Use a little bit of paper towel or tissue paper while it's still wet. More or less gone. And then when we come in with something slightly darker, then that will disappear, basically. So I'll just kind of even that out. I think I might have just made it worse. It's okay. It's okay. It will all work out here. So we've got a nice little bison. That's looking really good. And you kind of see everything is kind of mixing and moving pretty cool. And I'm actually going to try to do this in as few layers as possible because I want those watercolor textures because they are like a textured animal. They almost look like something elemental. So we're going to be trying to emulate that. So I'm going to move into my next color, which is going to be indigo. It's the darkest of the colors that at least I use on my palette. And I don't want it too concentrated, so I'll kind of mix it out with a little bit of water. And then I'm just going to put a little bit in here. We will absolutely be able to come in with some darker colors. But right now, this is going to give me just a little bit of that texture that I'm looking for, hopefully. And kind of be almost like a placeholder until we come into something darker. There we go. So you'll see I'm kind of avoiding the legs, but that's because I am going to come into something way darker here. We're not going like full bore dark, dark, dark. And you can always dilute it too if you did just go way too dark right there. All right, our buffalo. Now, its wee little face. Sorry, there's nothing wee and little about this animal. They are gigantic. It's big and handsome face. We're going to sketch here in 1 second. We're going to kind of wait until this horn, whatever's right here, is a bit more dry. So we really want that to be mostly dry, although just feeling it, it basically is. You can kind of do the finger test, or if you want, you can always add in just a little bit right here, sort of like that, just to kind of blot it. That's a fine way to do it too. But right now, we're going to add a bit of a cast shadow because these hooves are going to be very dark and are going to, you put the lighter thing kind of behind it and the darker thing is going to blot it out. So let's add our little cast shadow, just a little line of indigo. It's going to give some space, some spatialness. We want a spatial bison. That's what we're looking for. Right down here, one bit of that line kind of going all the way through. Almost like it's a bison on a tightrope. And you just grab a little bit of some water, just rinsing out my brush, turning it sideways just so I have a bit more control. And I'm just going to kind of paint through just to break up that shadow just a little bit. Unless it's like high noon and your bison is on like a perfectly white sheet of ice or something like that, which is a look. And that will kind of break up our bison there. And once we add some of these other colors, it's really just gonna, you'll see. There's words and I don't have them, but like it's gonna do that. All right, nice work. So we have this, and now let's add its face. So its little haircut here, right here, this little bit. This is gonna be really dark. This little snoot is gonna be pretty light, and then its little beard, the hair, the wattle of hair, this right here is going to be much more dark. So we're going to kind of put in these light colors, and then we're going to add these dark colors and just let them flow into the light ones instead of like trying to define what it is, because it's all hairy. So it's like not, there's no like hard angles on a bison is the problem. So here we go. Start with a little bit of water and something kind of brownish and russet. I've got a bit of red on my palette from something earlier. That's fine. I can use through a bit of that too. And we're just going to add a little bit of this right into here. Here we go. Like I said, it's a little face right here. It has a bit of color in there. So there we go, right there like that. And now let's make some stuff that's going to kind of mix to the edges. So maybe a bit of indigo, some purple. You can see how our purple kind of faded there earlier. Purple goes on really strong and dark and then kind of fades depending on what purple you have. So don't be afraid to use a little bit more than you might think you need. A little bit in here, same up here. I'm cutting it with the purple just because I like I said, I like that combination. I like how they work together. I think it's interesting. And you could also be using like a nice dark blue, but something that's still got a little bit of power to it. Like an ultramarine or something like that. There we go. A little bit of purple. Okay, and then let's add, is it time? It might be time. Very soon we're going to add a bunch of indigo. And I think it might be time. Let's give it a go here. So that's just our indigo. I'm just going to work it right down here. I'm trying to use kind of as few colors as possible, which seems boring, right? Like watercolor, you have access to just all of this color, and then when you start mixing stuff, it just makes all, like, it's just, why wouldn't you just flood something with color? But I find that if you can be a little bit more judicious, it gives your painting a little bit of, well, everything just matches, you know? The fewer colors there are, the less chance there is of clash. And, well, bison's all about clash. Bisons love clash. I've seen them running at each other. But we're just kind of trying to just stick with a few colors that work well. That's why I've got so few in my palette, is it works, you know? It's like they all mostly know how to play, and they play pretty nicely together. And that's kind of what I need. But there we go. Do you see it's kind of coming together with this nice dark indigo, and I'm just gonna see, give a little bit more below its face. And now I'm just going to kind of work my way back here. There's two things we can do with this if we want. Because we already added this, if we want, we can just use our brush and we can just sort of, we can use water to kind of blend stuff out. You can also kind of stipple. Stipple is, I don't know the origins of the word, but it's just kind of where it's this. Stippling. Something. I think that's the word. I'm sure every art word had like, this is probably like an exact term. There's probably some French word for like, oh, using the edge of the brush versus the point of the brush. But you can kind of just fade it out one way or t'other. You can also add some like little kind of crease lines if you want, something like this. And there are no rules. So you can also do a little bit of both too. If you don't love it, you can just add a touch of water and let it fade out sort of that way as well. Something like this. But whatever it is, you do kind of fade it a little bit. And that texture is good because buffalo are kind of a dynamic critter. Can you call something that's 2,000 pounds a critter? Kind of doesn't feel right. But I'm sure, I mean, you know, deep down inside, all Great Danes think they're a lapdog. I'm sure deep down inside, all buffaloes feel like they're a critter. All right, bison, not buffalo, sorry. I'm gonna learn all about these things at some point, and we're gonna make so many sketches. That'd be fun to make a life-size sketch of a bison. That would be pretty cool. They make watercolor paper that big, I think. Okay, now we're just adding a little bit more down here. Not going all of the way, so I don't want this to be fully black. I want this to be a little bit of some other colors. So I'm actually gonna add, here we got a bit of our kind of burnt sienna mix. And just kind of moving it up here. There we go, something like this. Because when we do come in with this piece, that's gonna be very dark right here. So we really wanna just be able to just focus on that as we need. Maybe we can add some burnt sienna down here by the little leg ruffs. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to show you this just a little closer. Oh, I love where this is going. Okay, here's our bison so far. So it looks a little bit demonic. I think honestly mostly because of that eye. We are going to fill that eye in, and it's going to look lovely. It's a little scary right there. You want a little white spot in the eye. The reason I leave it white is because you want just the hint. Just like the hint of eye reflection, it really kind of brings something to life. But until there's just a hint left, it really makes them look dead, but like not just like possessed dead. So we will be fixing that. As for the rest, once it's dry a little bit, we'll kind of work all of this down, which will look really cool. So I'm gonna go toss it next to the heater just for 25 seconds. It'll dry really fast. Use a bit of this too, if you want. It kind of capillary action will sort of suck up the little bits of drop. If you have like too much water sometimes, it's almost like a little sink gets stuck there. So what I'm doing right now is I am tossing it right by this heater. It'll just take a little blast. You can also use a, whatever they call it, hair dryer. That's a really quick way to kind of speed stuff up if you're feeling impatient, or you get a couple going next to each other. For instance, you could do like the lynx and you could do a buffalo, and then while you're waiting for the buffalo to dry, you could be working on the lynx. While you're waiting for the lynx to dry, you could be working on the buffalo. It's a good way to do them as well. But we have 24 of these for you to use, everything from beavers to foxes to bears and flying squirrels. So if you want to be really ambitious, you could always do 24 at once as well. There are no rules. Okay, let's go grab this buffalo. It should be about good. Let's find out here. Yeah, good enough. It'll do. Dry-ish. So good thing we got that cast shadow. Once all of the legs are in, it will really kind of come into shape here. That's where like the shadow kind of puts it on the ground. Once the legs are filled in, it is on the ground. So here we go. Let's fill this in. And I love this, right? you could do this in like oil paints by painting in the buffalo dark and then speckling it with something light. But it's just there's something so cool about that negative space, just like really gives some good texture. These are grungy animals. I mean, they're not wearing flannel and listening to Nirvana, but they're cool. They're cool. Okay. Buffalo, buffalo, bison, bison. We have, let's see, this shape. We're going to be adding a little bit of something right here. It's a little bit darker, just to kind of break up these. So here we go. A little bit of indigo. Going right up over the edge. Like this. Ooh, blooming a little bit, but that's okay. They are fuzzy animals. The shadows are going to do stuff like that. There we go. And I'm going to kind of go up because they got these like tiny little hips. Like its legs starts here, I think. Sort of. Like I think this is kind of its hip. And so almost like pointing up toward its tail a little bit, and then adding a little bit of just this pure water. I'm just doing this to kind of level it through. There we go. And then we're gonna use some more water, just gonna pull it down. Maybe a bit more indigo too. But you see that kind of gives it its shape back. It's a weird one for me. Maybe it works for other people. Or bison are like, oh yes, of course. Why wouldn't you do it any other way? But it always kind of feels funny for me, kind of angling so high up there. Adding a bit of brown too, just for fun. Indigo is a great color because you can really kind of put the indigo down and then just add any other color you want sort of on top of it, and they sometimes play nicely, or at least make some really interesting shadows and things like that. While that's there, let's now work on this leg up front. Same deal, we're doing some indigo to kind of break up these shapes, and we're getting darker and darker as we're kind of going down. So here is a little bit more of our darker indigo. Right there. Lovely, lovely. And I'm gonna kind of put these little sort of streaked lines because this is where the hair is gonna be. So I don't want it too smooth. I'll show you what I mean here in 1 second. Right there. Oh, concentration's real. And then I'm gonna continue on this line, maybe even going up a little bit into the neck, and I'm gonna fill all that out with just some water. And I'm kind of scraping it off the edge here because I don't want too much water, but I want just enough that I can kind of still pull stuff around. Right there, just like that. There we go. You can really play with watercolor right up until the very end, but it's coming through. So you can kind of see the layers that kind of put this thing down, because they really are not that many shades, but just by using a little bit of shades, and honestly, what are we using? Burnt sienna, purple, and indigo. By just using 3 colors, we're really able to kind of get a really good sense of depth with this animal. I do want this to dry before I put in this leg. That leg is going to be very dark, and I don't want those two to mix. So I could do 2 things. I could either dry it, or I can work on all these other details while it dries. So I'm going to give that a go. Other details such as the feet. There we go, a little bit of a foot right here. A little bit of a foot right here. Adding these 2 little bits of the hoof right there, and then I'll be adding a little bit of water. Now, American bison are really cool because they're basically, really good for the ecosystem that they're on, the plains in particular, because these hooves would just kind of, they'd fertilize the ground. They would, do really good things by eating down the grass, but then their feet would also almost be like those, if you've seen those like machines on golf courses that kind of pull I think it's for irrigation or drain or something like that. They make like little tiny, basically bison hoof marks and kind of pull stuff out. Their feet were even almost like gardening implements. So they're a really, really cool ecosystem. They got hunted down almost to extinction as both a way to people using pelts for money, but also they're trying to kind of drive out the indigenous population, which had used bison just as a really effective, life source. But there's been some really cool efforts to kind of understand just what an effective way that was to both, cultivate an ecosystem, but also just how important it is to graze without fences. And the overgrazing that we have now might be solved by learning from the past there. All right, nose time. A little bit of a nose, being very careful here. Don't mess up the nose job. Okay, just a little bit down. Almost like the rebel symbol from Star Wars. There we go. Because we all know buffaloes are rebels without a cause. Okay, and now I'm just being so careful. I want just the tiniest little bit of a eye. There we go. Okay, that should be enough. If you mess this up and like fully fill in the eye, you can always use a white colored pencil or a gel pen, put that little dot in. That's honestly a faster way to do it. There we go. Kind of see. And now we're going to add that horn. Just 1 second. Right here. There we go. Okay, so this leg or horn. Oh, we can do the leg. They're both going to require more or less the same color. So the leg, we're just adding here, and this is going to be more or less just pure indigo. The reason we added all those other colors earlier was to both let them dry and also give a little bit of distinction between these two. That's kind of the hardest thing with all these legs. Like, I don't know how I'd paint a centipede, but you need just enough sort of daylight between them. See where they're at. There we go. It's a simple thing, but it makes a big difference, right? Oh, I really should put a tail on this, shouldn't I? What does a bison tail even look like? I don't think they're like the little whippy ones. I think they're actually just like fur. Maybe I won't. Maybe his tail's going the other direction. When in doubt, hide the tail. But we got to get this last horn on because, well, it's close. Honestly, I think that might be it. But let's add just maybe a touch of indigo to the ear. Something like that. That's too much. Best friend, use a little bit of this. There we go. That's fine. And then the horn, I'm just going to add a little bit of indigo just along the back edge just to give it some definition. So we'll just get real concentrated here and just doing a little bit of... Oh, I don't like that. I don't like that too much at all. I'm gonna pull that too. You know what? I think the horn might be just fine as it is. Maybe it's the base that I don't love. But to be honest, the horns kind of just like appear out of their head anyway. So yeah, maybe just something like that. There we go. Okay. Now we're gonna hide the tail. We're gonna hide a little bit of the horn. We got a little tiny peak of the horn there. I'm just gonna quickly toss this to get a little bit of heat, just so you can see it dried. It's really interesting just how much watercolor changes when it's dry. Like the difference between like an indigo layer that is not dry versus an indigo layer that is dry is absolutely huge. And so a lot of times it's worth not judging anything until it's dry, both good or bad. Sometimes you make something, you're like, it's perfect. I was so bold. I love it. And then you dry it and you're like, oh, I could have been more brave. And then sometimes you're like, I hate it. It's done. I'm finished. I quit as an artist. And then you see it dried and you're like, oh, it's lovely. It's perfect. I was so bold and brave. So it should only take about a second to dry. But if you like the buffalo, we have one sketch for every day. You can download all of them if you want. Lots more ungulates. Who knows? You want to try an elk next time? Use an elk. And we have two different versions of each too, in case one, you kind of felt like you wanted some more of the cross hatching, or if you just wanted the loose outline as well. It can sometimes make a really big difference, which is really fun. Okay, the moment of truth. Here we go. Oh, grabbing our buffalo. All dry. And ta-da! Look at that bison. Look at that bison. Got the eyes, the ears, the horns, and now you got the largest North American land animal. Until whales learn to walk again, and then good luck. Anyway, lots more of these. Would love to know what you think. definitely drop us a line. You can find us on Discord, YouTube, Twitch, all the rest. But what would you like to paint next? I'd love to know.